Welcome to another episode of The Meeting is Dead, Long Live the Meeting, the podcast dedicated to rescuing you from the soul-crushing abyss of pointless meetings. I'm your host, Barry Bramley, and today, once again, we're diving into the trenches of meeting reform. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jean Cooper, a psychologist, adventurer, and longtime student of the unseen forces that influence people, teams, and organizations. Jean's work is rooted in the pioneering legacy of the Tavistock Institute, where he learned to turn the magnifying glass inward, using himself as an instrument to detect, contain, and work with the often unbearable dynamics playing out below the surface. He believes that only by acknowledging our own blind spots can we begin to tune into what's really happening in the room. Jean describes himself as someone pulled towards the unknown, someone who trusts his instincts and invites others to do the same. His lens blends the analytical and the intuitive, the psychological and the poetic. Today we're digging into a comment Jean made on a recent article I wrote about meetings, in which he suggested that meetings often serve as a collective social defense mechanism, a way to manage the anxiety of difficult work by finding safety in togetherness. But what begins as comfort, he says, can become a cycle, one where avoidance masquerades as alignment and progress gets replaced by presence. It's a conversation today about what meetings reveal, what we're really defending against, and how we might begin to engage more honestly with our work and with each other. Jean, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here with me.
Thank you, Barry. Nice to be here.
So, Jean, I've known you for a long time in different contexts, and we've connected recently. I know that you've taken a trip through Africa. Tell me a little bit about your background quickly. So take some time. Tell us about being psychologist, adventurer, Tavistock, Africa, KTMs. Take it away. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay, well, I grew up in Pretoria, in South Africa, and I still live here. I've lived here my whole life, studied here, went to school here, apart from 4 years where I lived in Chicago for my wife's job. I studied industrial organizational psychology at Tuks, the University of Pretoria. When I got to my master's year, I started to do some weekend work with two clinical psychologists who took corporate teams out on adventure high ropes courses for team building. And my job as the student was to put the ropes up on the poles and to keep the people physically safe during the exercises. But during the debrief conversations, what struck me was that they could see things that I couldn't see, and it perplexed me. I realized that I was about to register as a psychologist, industrial psychologist, yet it's so obvious that there are things that the clinically trained guys could see that I couldn't see. They were just able to put their finger on the thing that wasn't said but that was there. And at that stage, I'm not sure what the programs are like at the moment, but in those years, the industrial psychology departments were mostly in the traditional Afrikaans universities. They were situated within the economic and management sciences. So they didn't have a lot of psychology or let alone psychodynamic or psychoanalytic theory as part of the program, which you would find, I think, more prevalent in the traditionally English-speaking universities. Anyway, that piqued my interest. And then I used my PhD program to kind of catch up, I think, on my own reading in terms of psychoanalysis. And then I was lecturing at UP at that stage, and the dean then sent me in 2008 to the Tavistock Institute's annual Leicester conference. We can speak about what that conference is a bit later. Well, let me say it now. So that conference is a 2-week immersion into a temporary organization. So all conference participants form a temporary organization that gets born on day one, dissolves at the end of the 14 days. We have shorter versions in South Africa and other places in the world as well. During that time, there's not one lecture, not one presentation being made. The primary task of the conference is to study its own dynamics as they evolve in the here and now. I was young then. I was in my middle 20s, I think. And I bumped into myself a couple of times during that conference and realized, oh boy, there are some blind spots that I have to work with. And then signed myself up for psychotherapy when I came back, and never been not in psychotherapy since. When we were in Chicago, I was in psychoanalysis. That's 4 days a week for 4 years. The whole notion being that if you want to make yourself available to assist clients, let's say to accompany clients in their process of working with their blind spots, you need to have done much of that work yourself. You need to be in that work yourself, at least. Often we work in teams as well. So let's say 2 people consult at the same time. So that we can also be mirrors for each other in terms of our own blind spots, because we all project our own stuff anyway, but the more aware you are of your own blind spots or your own hidden dynamics or the old scars that tend to influence the way in which you show up, the less likely you are to project those things onto your poor clients, and then sometimes unwittingly and unintentionally doing more harm than good. So I think that's part of the work. But anyway, so that 2008 conference and then my subsequent psychotherapy process caught me hook, line and sinker for this type of work, which is called systems psychodynamics. What it means is you see all organizations as systems. You say socio-technical systems. There's a people component, a social component, and there's a technical component, the machines, policies, etc. But it's systems psychodynamics, meaning we look at both the conscious and the unconscious. And yeah, so I've built my career around that now for the last, I think, 20 years.
Okay, so let me just pause you there. So what you're saying is for the majority of us, a meeting is a meeting. You go to it because you're getting called to it or you've been invited to it. You've got to make some decisions. You've got to get some things done. You've got to make some agreements. It's a very simple thing. It's half an hour. It's an hour. What you're saying is you've spent your career studying the dynamics of what's going on in that meeting, but you're saying that that's what you do. You watch how people are engaging, who is, who isn't, the stuff below the surface.
Well, okay, so let's say the meeting, of course, is an event that takes place within the broader organizational context. For that time and place, so the meeting has time and space boundaries. Meetings in this conference room from this time to this time. There's a task boundary. We meet for this reason. There's membership boundaries. Who are the people that's invited to that meeting? Who are the ones that should be there but was forgotten to be invited? So those are some boundaries at play, making this meeting a subsystem of the overall system. And in systems theory, you'll see that subsystems reverberate and they are similar in the dynamics that they display and the structures that they form. So you can look at any subsystem of the bigger system and just from that already start to form hypotheses about what may be playing out in the bigger system. So of course, that the moment in time when the meeting takes place, this meeting sits within the broader systemic context and some of the broader dynamics will be visible within the meeting itself.
So there's enough going on in a meeting in an hour for you to begin to build a picture of what's happening in the broader organization, no matter how big it is.
Oh, yes.
There's that much going on. It's not just we're sitting down to go through an agenda to get out in an hour.
No, I can give you an example. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So I think many managers have been in meetings where, well let's say the meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. At 10:02, 10:03, 10:04, people start to drizzle into the meeting. Maybe the manager himself or herself arrives 10 past 10. Just how the time boundary of the start of the meeting has been dealt with already says something. At that stage, I won't know yet what it's saying. It's too soon, but I know that something is happening here. Now the meeting starts. Some meetings, you'll see the manager or the leader of the meeting, the one who called the meeting, will be stating the reason of the meeting, state the questions that they need to work with, and very often see that they also answer their own questions. They ask a question, no one says anything, they answer the question. One or two people in the meeting are on their laptops, busy with something else, I guess. And you often get a meeting that can conclude and very little has been spoken by anyone other than the one that had to call the meeting in the first place. So if that's the pattern that's playing out, of course there's something happening below the surface. To what degree is there a culture of dependency, so to speak, in the organization where people depend on those in charge to not only give direction, but also give nurturance and to absolve them from anxiety, for instance. So if the chairman of the meeting asks a question and stays quiet, at some point you can feel the level of anxiety starting to rise. And if that same chairman can't handle that level of anxiety, they will rescue by giving the answer or making it easier. So they rescue the group, and in so doing, taking away the group's responsibility for grappling and solving things themselves, and they take it upon themselves. You will probably then see outside of the meeting, it may be the same manager that struggles to get inputs from the team. You kind of have to ask someone 10 times, the deadline is passed now, please give me this. If you think of the dynamics of authority, so the degree to which people feel authorized in the system also determines the degree to which they feel authorized to speak in a meeting and to make a contribution. If it's implicit that in this meeting or in this organization, you don't contradict the boss, you especially don't say something that they won't like, everyone already knows what the taboos are. So those things won't be said. So those thoughts won't be able to be thought in the meeting.
We've got together now because of a comment you made on a post that I put up. And in the comment, I think you were suggesting that meetings often function as a social defense mechanism against anxiety. That's what you said. Meetings
Yes.
often function as a social defense mechanism against anxiety. Can you unpack this a little bit further? What do you mean by social defense mechanism?
Okay, so social defense mechanism is a mechanism, it's something that people do together to alleviate the whole group from their shared anxiety. So the first famous article in this field was written by Isabel Menzies-Liff in 1960 from research that she's done in the UK nursing service, where in the hospital that she used as her case study, for instance, she found that the nurses started to find a mechanism, a ritual amongst themselves, where they wouldn't speak of sick person John in bed A, they will speak of the liver in bed A and the kidney in bed 9, or whatever. So in order to alleviate their own anxiety of intimately caring for people and then going through their suffering with them and the risk that they may die while you are there, to alleviate that anxiety, to block them from that anxiety, they broke people up in their minds in terms of their organs in order not to deal with the whole person, but to only deal with a part of the problem. And I can give you an example in organizations, for instance, what we do. So let's say, I'll get to meetings now, but another social defense that's often used in organizations is the way we try to meticulously get the perfect formula for performance appraisal. Why? Because it is anxiety-provoking for a manager to sit with their team member and to speak about the fact that they really think that this team member is busy letting them down. They think they can do better. They don't know how to put it. And because of the difficulty of that conversation, to have an open, frank, hard conversation, which you can still do with empathy. To get away from that, what we do is we outsource the whole problem to HR. Now, HR has to come up with some perfect solution that's going to scale everyone in the organization on a level 1 to 4. And the inter-rater reliability needs to be perfect. And poor old HR always gets slammed because it is an impossible task that they are being tasked with. It's not possible to do that. The amount of money that social systems, which is organizations, teams, nation states, sports teams, the amount of money and time that people will invest in order to defend themselves against anxiety is tremendous. You can think about performance appraisal systems, for instance, out there, and how many there are and how much you can pay for it. Whereas what you need people to be able to, you can jot your notes on a serviette and sit and have an honest conversation regularly with your team about how things are going. And of course, also true performance appraisal is so scary because it has to go both ways. Now we find 360 tools and techniques in order to get feedback about the manager in a way that won't get the subordinate in trouble, etc., etc., etc. We can say blah blah blah. If you can create an atmosphere in your team where the team members can tell you, listen, Rassie Erasmus, we didn't like what you did yesterday. And in that sense, from what we know of the Springboks team, it's okay. In those meetings, I think those conversations are okay. Players can tell you, we don't agree with this, we don't agree with that. So you get that brutal honesty both ways because the leader has the internal capacity, take the critique, work with it, and give it back in a way that's constructive. But all of this is scary. And let's work now with the teams.
So dumb it down for me now. How then is a meeting representative of a social defense mechanism? Just a standard normal meeting. You've given some nice big examples, but how does the meeting do that?
I don't think a standard normal meeting is the example. The example in that specific LinkedIn post that you had was about too many meetings. That was the example.
Right, yes.
Too many meetings one can hypothesize it's a defense. Anything that happens in the company that is not clearly, rationally directed at the primary task of the company, you can start to hypothesize this is probably a defense against something. I don't know what yet. So if too many meetings mean that people don't get their work done, if people feel it's a waste of time, if the word too is in front of the many, it means rationally and consciously, everyone in that organization will tell you that the meetings that we're having here is not clinically directed at the primary task. We are doing something else here. So in system psychodynamics language, we'll say if anything is not directed at task, you are acting as if X. What is that X? So we're acting as if something else is true. than the primary task being the thing that needs to govern everything. So our work is then to figure out what is this X about. And it happens in all companies. There's no such thing as an ideal company. There's no such thing as an ideal team or an ideal meeting. It happens all the time. But our work as team members, as team leaders, as organizational consultants is to hold in mind very clearly what is the primary task. Now, just being in relation to a primary task already puts everyone in that organization in a field of tension, because you can fail at it. It's probably tough. There are probably competitors out there. So there's a field of tension and a level of anxiety involved just because you run onto the field for the match to start playing. There are butterflies around. So that's there. Now the question is, to what degree can we channel, let's say hold, contain, transform, channel the energy, the anxious energy, rather than trying to defend against it. So to try to defend against it, you want to suppress it. You want to act as if it's not there. So with too many meetings, we can say, many things could be possible. So let's say, in the first place, I would say too many, it means that it's a defense, and it's a social defense because people do this thing together. Against anxiety, we're not sure exactly what the anxiety is about. Maybe the anxiety is about taking up your own autonomy. So if you are in an organization where there's been examples in the past where people who made mistakes were fired and authority and autonomy isn't delegated clearly from the top, then people will feel scared to stick their heads out and to do something for fear of catching fire. Now, in the meeting, there's safety in numbers. So every person needs to decide something rather than just going on with the job, deciding what's within their authority to decide. They feel I need a couple of people with me in the meeting to think this.
So instead of me making a decision and sticking my head out to go, I made it. In a meeting, I've got John saying, I agree. I've got Dave saying, I agree. I've got Susie saying, I agree. Therefore, when I take that action and someone calls me out on it, I can go, yeah, but I didn't do that on my own. I had John, David, and Susie who all agreed.
Yes.
Aha.
And just setting up the meeting already kicks the can down the road, because you're setting up the meeting for next week, Wednesday. So it means already between now and next week, Wednesday, nothing's happening on that specific task because you've set it up for then. And there will be others involved. So you won't have to stand by a decision that you've made. Why? I don't know. Maybe your boss won't have your back. Maybe there's ambiguity in the broader system whether they really want this thing or not.
So kicking the can down, the boss says, why haven't you done this? You go, because we've got a meeting. I don't have to make a decision till next Wednesday because I'm giving it all to the meeting.
Yes.
That's fascinating. So, Jean, the other thing you mentioned in your comment was you talked about comfort against isolation. So again, it might be in the context of too many meetings again, but you said meetings provide comfort against isolation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that sense that we're in it together, that I won't be branded if I made a mistake. The lack of self-authorization to do something, so that, to just feel that we are doing a huddle. And I mean, it's very easy when you're in the meeting to see whether this meeting is a social defense or whether it's in working mode. A meeting that is in working mode, where everyone is there to do the task of the meeting because the meeting is necessary for the task of the organization, will be one where, in the first place, people will be on time for the meeting because they are not attacking the boundaries of the meeting. They are there on time. They know this thing is important. It will be very clear from the very start what the meeting is about. And when the conversation drifts somewhere, someone in the meeting will call it out and say, okay, wait, that is for that other thing, other project. That's not for now. Let's just stick with what we're busy with now. Because people are also very clever to avoid the anxiety of dealing with the task at hand. They will now bring in another task that's also important, but it's not the task that needs to be discussed here, meaning this meeting doesn't have the mandate to make a decision on that thing. But still, enough people in the meeting may be interested in that thing for that thing to be then used as the red herring in order to ensure that we don't get to the point of making this decision. Because once you make this decision, you will be held accountable for it. So another sign that a meeting is busy playing out some other unconscious role than its real role is if the decisions of the meeting aren't documented, and if people don't walk out of the meeting with a clear idea of what am I going to do now? Who's going to do what by when? The simple boundaries of time, task, responsibility, role, authority. Who will do what when? If we walk out of there without those things, we've just been there to be in the same room and breathe the same air, which is very human. It's also necessary to do that. But it's better to create spaces for that then. So if you want spaces for people to just be together and be human together, then create those spaces. Go for breakfast in the morning with your team, or lunch together, or get a tradition of one tea time in the day. You're just going to have tea together, like in the old days, in the civil service, I guess. But those social settings also serve a purpose, so that the meeting can then serve its purpose, and we just do work towards tasks.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot more going on in a meeting than I even imagined. So, Jean, I know you mentioned a few here, and I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily, but from your experience, what are some of the typical indicators of behaviors that you observe when you're watching a meeting that tell you a group is engaging in a defensive rather than a productive activity? And I know you've mentioned a few, but maybe it'll be helpful to pull some of those together.
Okay, I'll use 3 examples, which are the 3 classical ones that everyone can go and research if they want to. So it's Wilfred Bion, Bion, identified 3 basic assumption states that teams go into, teams or organizations. They go into these basic assumption mentalities where they act as if the assumption is true, and they don't act as if the task is the true thing that we need to work on. The one is the one that I mentioned earlier. It's the basic assumption state of dependency. So the group acts as if all good things come from the leader. They've projected their own competence onto the leader. They won't contradict the leader. They will wait for the leader to spoon feed, to ask the question, to give the answer, to tell them what to do, to make things easy enough, and they're out of it. Of course, that's a pattern that you can quickly pick up. You can see that the poor old leader is the one who's sweating, he does all the work. He's the one who's sweating. He's the one who's producing, performing, and everyone else, they're just there.
Okay, so let's be clear, that's not always on the employees or the meeting people. Sometimes you can have organizations where a leader creates that, right? They want to be that person. So it's not always somebody giving up control. Sometimes it's somebody taking control, or not.
It's a dance.
Okay.
So it often happens when let's say a hotshot CEO is brought in from outside. Now if people already have a messiah idea about this person coming in, and this person knows they need to show the board and whoever that they've made the right decision, and it can kind of turn into a perfect storm. People initially, oh, you're so wonderful, you're so great. For the ego, it's very nice to hear all of that. So you become, so the moment you are in the leadership position and you start to get this larger than life feeling in yourself, you can feel people are adoring you. You must know that this dependency dynamic is in place, and you need to, as quickly as possible, change by saying, no, I'm not that. You know this. The answer is easy. I just came from another company. You guys know this company much more than I know it. Don't give me that. Bring your own point of view. So you have to break down this larger than life image that people are building about you very quickly. In churches, for instance, you often get that where the pastor is made completely larger than life, and they also their ego enjoys this whole process, but it's long-term inherently a toxic environment, and the leader is the one that will be taken down. So the Messiah gets crucified in the end. So you have to look out for it. Another one is what Bjorn called fight-flight. So the group acts as if it has an external enemy. The fight-flight can be either this meeting against, my department is meeting and we all speak about how bad the other department is because what. Or you, of course, can have that splits of fight-flight within the meeting itself. So if you're in the meeting, what it feels like in a fight-flight meeting is it feels hostile, the high levels of paranoia, people think that others are doing things behind their back, and it's based on the assumption that things are unsafe, I have to protect myself, and everyone is out to get me. The way in which you can hear that playing out is if people start to speak in binary language, so us, them, so it's either good or bad splits within the team, or our team is the good team and that team is the bad team. The moment you hear the binary, you know that we are living in a complex world, so there must be points on the continuum between the 2 points in the binary. So you know the group is oversimplifying, and oversimplification is a defense against the anxiety that comes from complexity. So then you know that the team is anxious about something, and we've got to work with that so that they can integrate the pluses and minuses. So how our projection works is the stuff that I can't tolerate in myself. I convince myself that these things are actually in the other, which is that whether it's a person across the table from me or someone in a different team. So I pretend that all the minuses are there, all the pluses are here, and I feel relieved of that for a moment. But the problem is the team's capacity to think good thoughts is diminished, because now the team is thinking in binary patterns where lots of the nuance is lost. So they won't be able to make a good decision when they're in that mode. Although it may feel good because it provides a huge emotional relief to know that here with my buddies in my team, we can all hate that other team together. And it feels a huge relief. It makes me forget momentarily about the anxiety that I face in terms of getting this thing over the line, what the task is concerned. But the momentary relief that meetings that are in basic assumption mode is, the momentary relief it gives means it's a drug. So you'll do it again. So we set up that whole, the bigger picture of too many meetings. Part of it is also this meeting didn't fully satisfy. Because on some level, I know that what we engaged with there wasn't solving the problem. So I still have the same need, and we have to get another fix and another one and another over time.
So even as I listen to the first two, it's not just a meeting, right? As you pointed out, it's an organization. And I don't want to go there now, but I think of particular countries in the world at the moment where at least 1 and 2 play themselves out, where you have the strong leader and you have that binary thinking. And there's multiple countries right now. So I guess this applies no matter the size of the group.
Yes, if you want to read on how these things play out in large groups, so it means in nations and over history, Vamik Volkan, Volkan, is a Turkish-born psychoanalyst who lives in America now. He wrote great things. It's very applicable to the South African situation as well. If you think of let's say the social defense of our time is BEE. So we don't want to confront the anxiety involved in facing our joint trauma together. It's easier to create a system of checkboxes. How much shareholding here, how many people on that level or on this level, than to work with the fear, the shame, the guilt, the pain, the rage, complexity that we are in and that we've come from. Those things require conversations that are tough. So we create something else that can give us a sense that at least we're working on transformation, but we've changed the meaning of the word transformation so that it's then easier to work with numbers on sheets than it is to sit across from someone else at the table and talk about what they evoke in me, what I'm in them, etc.
Okay, number 3.
The third one is called pairing. So you'll get 2 people in the team being set up unconsciously by the rest of the team to do the thinking and the creativity on behalf of the team. So all that, so it's like so you find people watching a tennis match as a conversation and the debate starts to happen between 2 members. So it's as if the group delegates unconsciously the responsibility for finding the solution to 2 members. So let's say in the dependency mode, we would expect the leader to come up with everything. And in the pairing mode, there's this underlying fantasy that this unison of 2 will come up with something that will save us from the responsibility to share in the solution.
Jean, in the beginning, you touched on Tavistock and you said, I'll come back to it. And you said, so you did give some insight into Tavistock. What was it about, your involvement? But how has the Tavistock Institute's approach influenced the way that you perceive organizational challenges? Maybe to give some theory, to give some practical examples from your work with Tavistock.
Just after the Second World War, it's more or less the first time when psychologists started to realize that human mind doesn't exist within the individual human skull. Mind exists between people. And you can see in the Second World War how perfectly nice, decent, civilized people in a group, the group gets a mind of its own. And the branch of study that's called system psychodynamics was born then. Figure out what is the psychodynamics, or in other words, what are the unconscious dimensions at play when people are together in groups. So that's one element, is the notion that the mind sits here among us. And you can take it one step further and say, I react towards my organization, not in terms of how the organization is, but in terms of how I carry the organization in my mind. So the system in the mind is the internal representation that everyone has about this organization. And I act according to what I believe is true for this organization. And in so doing, I often then strengthen and perpetuate the patterns that govern my behavior. So one thing is the acknowledgement that the group has a mind of its own. The other thing is that there's no such thing as a perfect team, group, family, nation, company. This ideal of the ideal family needs to be like this, or the ideal team, or the ideal leader needs to be like this. It fills the entire system with so much guilt and shame because we can never get to the ideal. And if I feel shame because of my shortfall, I don't want to put my shortfall on the table. I want to try and hide it. Or it's much easier than to project it on someone. So if I can get someone else then to become the scapegoat for the whatever that is going on, then I feel safe. But if you can acknowledge, listen, we are all imperfect people here. And if we work in a complex system, it means I'm with my one foot in my competence and with my other foot in my own incompetence. Even me, who's the leader, I'm also half competent, half incompetent, and all of you. So let's just do the best we can. And we know we're going to bump each other, going to be clumsy about this. It's amazing what companies do anyway, clumsiness and all. But let's just try and make this thing better. So let's strive for excellence over time. Meaning, but if we can put the cards on the table of the ways in which you have unwittingly and unintentionally contributed to the failure, so we can look at it at least. We have the data then, and we can think what needs to happen next, rather than trying to hide the fact that I'm not as ideal as I'm supposed to be. And then the whole thing becomes, smoke and mirrors. We've got to hide things, and then the motivation is then always there to scapegoat someone. So the group mind is the one. The other one is you are all imperfect. And the third one is that the organization is a system. What it means is what is enacted by one individual is a function of the system, and not only a function of the individual. We tend to be very astute in thinking systemically when we are busy with financial or computer or engineering systems. But once it gets to human systems, we completely forget that. And we don't want to take the reflective loop. Why? Because the moment you take a reflective systemic loop means you are part of the very thing you are studying. So if I can see my team as a system, it means that when someone acts in a way that's not conducive to how we want things in this team, to not immediately jump to the conclusion that there's something wrong in that poor person's skull, but to think, how have we as a system colluded, contributed to, unconsciously, even with the best of intentions, but set up a situation that now set a dynamic in motion that is manifesting through one role that is being taken up. And if we can think in terms of role as the overlap between the individual and the team, it becomes safer to be in that team, because I know the mistakes that I make, the clumsiness, even here and there I may say something that's not politically correct. None of this is going to be used against me as a person. We are going to have the discipline as a team to look at whatever happens here as a function of the team. And we're going to give each other honest feedback, but you're also going to own up to the parts that we've played in. So what did I say or not say? What did I do or not do to get a specific person to catch the lightning in a specific situation? And that makes the whole organization and team setting a lot safer. So I think that's three of the main learnings from the Tavistock Institute. Group mind, it's imperfect, and it's a system.
John, if there's a team leader or a leader of a team rather, who is listening to this, how does a team or someone who leads a team, how do they begin to help their team to both see what you're talking about and then to begin to take steps to understand and, as you said, improve over time?
For a team leader, I think the first thing is invite people in the team to give their honest feedback. Tell them, I'm not the perfect team leader. I'm going to make mistakes. I tend to sometimes come across too strongly, or I tend to sometimes want to wait until I've heard everyone's decision before I make one. I can sometimes, when things get stressed, I can go in one of two or three directions. And I want to invite you to let me know when that happens. To the extent that the leader can invite and deal maturely with, so it doesn't mean roll over when anyone gives you any advice, but you deal maturely with the feedback. To that extent, the team becomes safer for everyone in the team. Because if I can critique Barry straight on, and he takes it and he engages with me, it becomes safer for other people to do the same. So what the team leader can do is hold your eye very closely on the boundaries. So let's use meetings then as an example. If you think of meetings, the meeting has a boundary of time, space, task, membership. If those boundaries are attacked, it means there's something happening there. They don't know how to say it, they act it. So they come late for the meeting, they don't prepare for the meeting. Or when they are there, they don't speak, they wait for you to do all the speaking, or they take the meeting away from its task. All those are indications that the boundaries of the meeting are being, so attacked is a strong word, but let's just use it, are being attacked. Because if the boundaries of the meeting is attacked, it means they are expressing something about your authority. Because the one in charge is the one who sets the boundaries. But we often don't want to take the one in charge head on. We'd rather attack the boundaries than attack the one in charge or the consequences that you may face. But if you can take all of that away, say, hey, I'm picking up something. There's a pattern here. For the last 3 meetings, we've been late. And I'm wondering what this is about. I'm not saying there's something wrong. I think what the group is doing, the group is mobilizing person X, is maybe the most senior person in the group, to be late and to take up a specific role. And I'm wondering whether there's something about a challenge to the direction that I'm taking this in. And I know when I started with this process, I was a little bit forceful in terms of we're going to take it this way. And we didn't really give time for it. Maybe that's what's going on. Let's just spend this meeting today, just speak about that. So to create openings where the team can reflect on how it is to be a member of this team. If people can say these, if they can speak out their frustrations, their anxiety, their fears, then there's less chance that they will act it out on the boundaries by sabotaging processes that they're busy with.
So let me ask you then, from a practical point of view, I mean, when I listen to you say that, that's all good and well, but when you're in a meeting, you're completely in the meeting largely. You're often there. That reflection requires space and time, which you can't often do in the meeting because you're in the meeting. And if something's being attacked, you're feeling all of those things. So how important then, because it's an expensive resource, so I don't imagine that it's easy to do it every single time you have a meeting, but how important is it to have from time to time someone who is trained, qualified, like the example you gave earlier on when you started out as the student and you watched those two therapists who were able to see things that you couldn't see? How important then is it for meetings to have that person in the room who can see things because they don't have skin in the game, they're not as invested, they've got the space and they can observe and then give feedback to go, here's some of the stuff I'm picking up that happened while you were meeting?
I mean, to the extent that it can be afforded, it's very important. A good consultant will also not make that meeting dependent on him or her. A good consultant will use their presence in a couple of team reflective sessions up front, use that presence as an educational process so that the team can start to do that on their own afterwards. Especially the higher up you are in the organization, the more important it is to actually do get someone from outside, because the time that meeting costs, and the decisions that are being made there, if those decisions are being made based on underlying assumptions, fears, fantasies, etc., it means the decisions that steering this entire thing are based on irrational components. And so for that to have someone in the room that can point it out in a way that's workable, speakable, non-threatening, it really helps. It really helps a lot. But if you're, let's say you're a project manager somewhere in the middle level of an organization. As I said earlier, to keep your eyes open for what's happening on the boundaries. And another technique could be to say, from now on, the last 10 minutes of every meeting, so we stop the meeting at 10:02, and the last 10 minutes, we're only going to use to talk about how was this meeting? What happened here? What did we do in the meeting? What would we have expected more of? So kind of a self-reflective loop for your team. How did we do in the meeting? And then over time, self-reflection leads to learning. Over time, the group will start to adapt their behavior.
Sean, as you point out, sometimes the cost of a meeting is not who's in the meeting. It's the work that comes out of it. The higher up you get in an organization where those decisions that are being made have huge financial consequences, having someone in the room is actually a very cheap resource when you compare it to that. Jean, in starting to wrap up now, maybe to finish with two questions. If you look ahead, what do you believe will be the biggest psychological challenges that organizations must confront, especially in this rapidly changing world? I think just one of the examples from a meeting point of view is the move from largely physical meetings to largely digital meetings. But there are other rapid changes that are happening. So what do you believe will be the biggest psychological challenge organizations have to confront?
I would say the ability to tap into and harness the human energy to their availability. I think maybe it started with the Industrial Revolution, but now in the AI revolution, people can much more easily go through a day without really accessing that which is uniquely human inside of them. If you think of human resources, think of the resources that are actually human. Think of tenacity, creativity, love, empathy, inquisitiveness, curiosity, playfulness. Those are the human resources. And now we don't have to lift heavy things anymore because machines do it. We don't even have to write a paragraph on your own anymore because a machine can do it. So what are we left to do? And to figure that out and to allow people to really be human. That's where the surprising competitive advantage will come from. Because everyone else is using AI. So if you can actually use humans and just use AI to do the dirty work, so to speak, and then use humans to make this thing something that is on a spiritual level If I say, if a human, it means goes to the natural and the biological, and then therefore also the spiritual essence of everything. Then you'll be able to create something that resonates with the universe in a way that your AI is not going to do. And to liberate that kind of energy, you need to build in mechanisms in your company where the frustrations, the stuff that builds up over time, where those things can be worked through and can be put aside so that the creative energy can be liberated towards task. But if people have to protect the wickets all the time, it means they're using so much energy to suppress their frustrations, to not offend the wrong person, to not say the wrong thing. And all that energy that they use for that is energy lost for production.
Sure.
So the challenge is the more we bring in technology, the more we have to go out of, we have to really literally go out of our way to retain and maintain and build human connection. So yes, we can all work remotely, but something is lost in that. And so you have to get out of your way to get people in a specific space where they can actually breathe the same air and touch each other and be together, because we are group animals. Company means group. We do this in company with others.
I agree. I think that is a huge danger. And then, John, lastly, as you look back over your career, and it's not over, of course, you're still young compared to me anyway, an insight, a piece of wisdom that you've gained from everything that you've done, not just at Tavistock, not just as an industrial psychologist, not just as a dad, as a husband. You've observed a lot, you've read a lot, you've bumped into you a lot. What would be an insight, a piece of wisdom you've gained that you wish more leaders fully understood or embraced?
I think that we cannot know or control the future. Embracing that makes you open for the unknown and for what's actually happening in the here and now, and to be present in the here and now and see what's happening. And in sports, they would say, play the ball that's in front of you. Trying to control the outcome and not allowing the outcome to be an emergent property of everything that happens until there places a lot of undue stress and responsibility on people. It's something I think that I learned a lot, especially on this bike that we did across Africa. Just seeing how people can live in the moment and for each other and not be so caught up as we tend to be in our Western mindset. We tend to become so caught up in our plans and our ideas of how things should be, and then we miss what's right there in front of us.
And when it comes to a meeting, that's all you've got, right? It's what's happening right here and now.
Exactly. And that's the irony. So we say you've got to prepare for a meeting. Yes, but if you over-prepare for the meeting and you don't allow anything to emerge there, then what's the use? Then you could have over-prepared and sent everyone the presentation and they can read it. But if you want the meeting to be a meeting of minds, you have to be unprepared enough so that you are able to create a collective thinking space for everyone there to bring in their perspectives and to dance together there. But you've got there must be space for a dance to occur. Otherwise, they'll only look at you giving a show.
Jean, thank you. I confess I was a little intimidated coming into this because as I researched you and the things that you spend your time on, I realized how little I knew and how many big words I'd have to practice and learn so that I could understand what you're talking about. I was hoping and expecting a great conversation with you, and you haven't let me down. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Barry. I really enjoyed it. As I said before, I was also full of butterflies going into my first podcast interview. So thanks for helping me break the ice.
Well, you've done darn well. Thank you, Jean. That brings us to the end of today's conversation. A huge thank you to Dr. Jean Cooper for taking us beneath the surface of our meeting culture and for reminding us that sometimes what's really in the room isn't on the agenda. If your team's stuck in a cycle of calendar chaos, meeting just to feel like you're doing something, anything, it might be time to call in reinforcements. That's where I come in. I help teams stop hiding in meetings and start getting real work done. Fewer meetings, better meetings, meetings that matter. That sounds like something your organization desperately needs, and let's be honest, it probably does. Reach out. You'll find all my details at barrybramley.com. Thanks for listening to The Meeting is Dead. Long live the meeting. If this episode made you squirm a little, good. Means you're getting somewhere. Catch you in the next episode, and remember, just because it's in the calendar doesn't mean it needs to happen.